Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement at Ecotrust Canada, and I'm here today with Chuck Rumsey, the CEO and President of Ecotrust Canada, and Celine Trojand, who is our new Chief Impact Officer. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to do a little Q&A session here to kind of lead into some of the projects that we're working on in 2021 and reflecting on, what has happened since the pandemic hit about a year ago and how the organization has shifted since then. So we've got a few questions, and just feel free to kind of go with it. And you don't have to stick entirely to the script or the questions. So here we go. Chuck, this is for you. What has been the biggest shift in the organization since the pandemic?
The most immediate noticeable thing that happened with the pandemic is that we all started working from home. So that is a commonly held happenstance for just about everyone in the working world. I would say that it's actually had some positive effects for this organization. I think we adapted very well to working remotely. And what's happened is it's allowed some of us actually to move out of urban areas. Like a couple of our folks have been able to move out of Vancouver and move out to more rural settings. Like it's a permanent move or semi-permanent move for them. And I think that's great for them as people, but also I think it's really interesting and helpful for us to be as an organization that works with rural and remote communities, for us to be less urban centric in where we actually live. And so, in that sense, it's been a positive. And I think it just reflects the reality that we would love to have more of our capacity spread out in more rural parts across Canada. I think that just allows us to give more geographic breadth. But I think, we can talk a little bit more about how delivery of our programs have been affected. That's another issue altogether. It's certainly been difficult for us to not be able to walk down the streets of the communities and meet with the community members and our partners that we work with. So that's been certainly a much more significant hurdle. What hasn't changed at all for us, though, really is our mission and the kinds of work we do. If anything, the pandemic has really just made all of that more urgent. But the kinds of work we do are really more in need than ever. And so from that point of view, I would say the pandemic has really just solidified that for us. And really engaged us in our mission that much more strongly.
Great. So for the next question, you've kind of answered it, but with Ecotrust Canada focusing on community-led solutions and projects, how has the organization's community approach adapted during the pandemic? And do you have any specific examples?
We like everybody else have had to take a step back and really depend on virtual connections. And so we certainly lose out on a certain degree of closeness and connection, direct connection with folks. You lose that ability to have those cups of coffee in a sort of really direct way. But it also opens up the door for more regular connection. And so we're, instead of traveling all over the place, where you're able to do more from one place and still be able to reach out to those more remote communities that you're working with. I think it definitely, we will really look forward to being able to get back into the room, especially for groups, for workshops, or where you want to have more opportunity to engage larger groups of people in a more fulsome discussion. We have had a couple of successful virtual workshops where we've engaged communities. Celine, I think you've actually had an opportunity to watch our Indigenous Homelands folks in that virtual setting. Maybe you've got some thoughts on how that's rolling out.
I mean, it looks really smooth, and I think maybe that's a testament to their work in communities and the relationships that they already have. One thing I would say about our approach during the pandemic is we, along with so many other people, have it's been an opportunity to really think about what's important. And I can see that show up in a lot of our work, we are adapting in the sense that we're consolidating what we need to consolidate, and the effort that is required to build relationships is high, and so I think that we're in a position, like so many other people, to really make our moves count. And I found that people are really thinking about what actually matters in their life and in their relationships, and that seems to be showing up in a lot of our community work. Is together all of us are thinking about that, and it provides a really interesting context around our mission. I don't think I've been in a single meeting with community members where we haven't talked about the horrible but clarifying presence of the pandemic in our work.
Celine, I'll ask this question then specifically to you. So you've recently joined the team as our Chief Impact Officer. What is it about Ecotrust Canada that strikes you as different than other organizations?
Oh, quite a bit. I was really struck by, I think, first about how Ecotrust really centers people in all of their work. But I would say, I think the standout is Ecotrust's chances to be courageous. So, I've worked in a lot of sectors where if the stakes are really high and the conflict is hot, organizations are just backing away slowly. If you are working in a community, for example, on housing, and there's, partnership agreements with, the local folks, and then there's a company at play, and there's kind of complicated dynamics where it seems like there's contradictions playing out, that economy versus environment contradiction and things like that. A lot of organizations will back away from that complexity. And I feel like Ecotrust runs towards it, because I feel like those areas are the places that we can have the most transformative conversations, the conversations that will move beyond, the systems that have put us in those traps, and I get really excited about that. That's unique bit of Ecotrust is we're not afraid to sit squarely in the middle, sit around the campfire squarely in the middle of all of those really nuanced, charged, sometimes very conflict-ridden conversations, and look for the innovative potential. And then the whole thing about proving the possible, to me, is it is the conversation that we need to have to be able to transform the way that we exist on the land here together in unceded territory in Canada. And I think that's really unique, and definitely one of the things that drew me to work with this team.
Hey, can I just ask a supplemental, Celine? So do you think we're crazy? I mean, people step away from this stuff for a reason, right? It comes with a whole bunch of risk. And I wonder if we talk about enough, what the downside to doing this is. Where do you see the trouble that we get ourselves into?
I mean, it depends on your perspective. I see it as a huge gift to be to walk into a space and be humble and ready to fumble, we're going to fail fast, we're going to fail hard, but I think our ability to pick ourselves up and keep trying to figure it out is why we've been around for 25 years, And so I think, there is lots of opportunity for stepping on landmines, for offending people, for getting wrapped up in something that that goes sour. There's lots of opportunity for failure. And I guess the flip side of that is as long as we are learning from all of those opportunities and all those mistakes, then it's not a, a risk, in my opinion,
No, I think that's a good observation. I would add to that. I think that sometimes it can feel, especially to external audiences, that we can lose our way in some of these conversations because we have to be so adaptable and meld ourselves to these differing circumstances. And so it's hard to be a flag bearer, like always be flying the same flag in the same direction when you're doing that kind of work. And I think it can look like sometimes it can look this way, and there's a legitimate risk of being adrift amongst all these conversations. And so, it's more reason for us. That's not a reason for us not to do it, but we just have to always be aware that there are risks to doing this. Otherwise, everyone would have that same approach. And so, I just want us to always be cognizant of what's both the rewards and the risks of working that way.
Yeah.
All right. Chuck, I'm just going to ask you to reflect on the past year now on some of the biggest impacts that you've seen come from Ecotrust Canada.
Yeah, it was a really busy year. Putting COVID aside, it would have been a really busy year, and then you throw COVID on top of it. And so it certainly kept everyone, really maxed out in terms of what they were delivering. And I think we should all be super proud of what we've been able to pull together. I guess I would, I hate to pick any favorites, but so I would be, it's always easy for me to point to really tangible stuff, like the kind of work that our energy team is doing in terms of their program around not just heat pump installations, but the pivot this year as well to focus on the policy work. And the way they brought those two things together, I think is, so you have this super tangible thing that we do around actually going into homes and actually, doing this really important retrofit, this very physical thing. And at the same time, that program has been able to bring in new capacity and really sort of start to make meaningful strides in influencing the much less tangible, but just as important aspect of policy and how to create the enabling environment for more tangible success. So that's been really satisfying to watch. I've been, as always, amazed that our fisheries team has been able to have the kind of reach and impact that it does have. The ability to actually have conversations with senior members of government, while at the same time maintaining relationships with the people who really matter, the actual fish harvesters themselves, it's just unparalleled. I don't see it in any other organization working in Canada to be able to make that bridge. And at the same time, see success in terms of what we're trying to build on the policy environment for fisheries. And again, at the same time, still be able to create programs around our fisheries monitoring, for example, that have a real and immediate tangible effect for fish harvesters, particularly First Nations harvesters on the BC coast. So again, it's a great combination of tangible success with creating an enabling environment. And then I will just, I'm gonna save some of my thoughts for maybe looking ahead, because something tells me you're gonna ask me about that as well, looking to the future.
Well, that's next. And that's for both of you. So what projects are you both excited about in 2021 and beyond?
Celine, you go first.
So two of our programs, Homelands and Climate, are both exploring new projects and partnerships this year. And I find that really, really, really energizing. I'm really interested to see also there's lots of threads that connect those two programs, especially in some of our others, and sort of the excitement about sort of like forging a new partnerships in those areas is really exciting. And I have to say the food system work is also really exciting to me. It's a new program, and one with lots and lots of potential. And again, lots of potential for connectivity. I feel like it's a space where there's lots of incredible work happening already, and it'll be so exciting to see where we can take it along with our partners. I especially within the context of COVID, I think food systems is something, it's kind of, it's so essential, and we have a really great team working on it. So yeah, excited to see where that goes, both land farming and ocean farming, and to see how they, are connected is pretty interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. That's where you stole my answer. I would say that when I look ahead at food, climate, housing, and the integrative potential of all three of those, those are some of the most exciting things we have to look forward to. And it's one of the reasons, we brought Celine on, is to really ramp up our ability to bring our individual programs more closely together. And whether that means all together in one community or all together in some other geographic scope is yet to be determined. But we clearly, having had really good success in the last couple of years, particularly in 2020, defining what these programs are, putting in strong leadership and strong capacity, great teams, applying their work on the ground, making the right connections. Now the challenge becomes how do our teams and how do our programs work together more effectively? And that's probably the most exciting thing we have to look forward to in the year ahead and years.
Great, thank you both. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So with the rise in social justice movements, what is the organization doing to take meaningful steps toward decolonization?
Yeah, maybe I'll just do a quick a prelude to that, which is like our focus on social justice and equality and equity does not come as a result of the rise in social justice movements, which, by the way, is fantastic news for Canada and the world. However, we've been working at that for 25 years. We have been focused, it has always been at the core of our work, of our vision and our mission and the work we deliver. Have we always done a great job of making sure it's central, like a central power and like a central engine to our work? I mean, that's waxed and waned over the years, but it's always been there. Certainly with regards to how we work with Indigenous communities, has always been a primary motivator for our work. So I think the question is less about how are we responding to the current momentum around social justice, but I think it's interesting just for us to reflect on how what has always been part of our work for 25 years is finally set within a context where there's a greater groundswell of awareness among everyone else, who's not just working in our field, but everyone else, we hope, who's just quite simply living and breathing, in the places we live. So now I'll just throw it to you, Celine. We did hire you to help us make sure that we are developing and implementing kind of very specific measures, strategies and measures around these issues. And maybe I could just ask you to reflect on where you think we're headed with that.
Yeah, well said, Chuck, about the sort of, like where this is coming from. I would add that, one of the gifts of this past year has been the commitment of resources and the language and the materials, to be able to use in the organization. Like, we have a lot of work to do. And part of, all the social justice activity that has been happening the last year is helping us do that, and we've got some really practical plans, around working with external facilitators and Indigenous decolonization professionals, as well as just, there's sort of like the practical piece, and then there's the more sort of like mindset piece, which kind of come together. And I'm really interested in both, like I know that as a white lady, I've got lots of blind spots. And so I want to make sure that I'm, bringing on the perspectives and the folks, required to make sure that I'm not perpetuating, I'm being active in my like anti-racist approach in our work. And I think, our job is to bring staff and board and our community along with us in that journey, wherever they are. So there's, we'll be practical things are like revamping our hiring practices and renewing our partnership agreements with the communities that we already work with. And, next time we create a partnership or build relationships, really looking to, how we build reciprocal, like mutual, decolonized, relationships with community and community members in our work going forward, I think is a huge priority for the organization. Because really, so much of our relevance and success hangs on our ability to do that. So I think the biggest piece where this is going to show up is actually in our forward-looking stuff, in our strategic planning processes, and how, we fold decolonizing approaches into our strategic plan, and how we decide to come together and act together in the future. I think that's where it's going to show up the most, in the most transformative and sort of practical ways, both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I just want to thank you for jarring my brain there. I kind of almost committed one of the many dangerous ways of, let me put it this way. It's really easy for me to say, oh, well, we're a social justice organization, so of course we work on equity and social justice and racial justice, and that actually is a trap for us. It's really easy to get complacent in that space and make assumptions that because your mission states this or that we're on the right side of this, and even if we are on the right side of it, that's not enough. Right. So I totally get sucked into that as well. And so I think that's why we need to keep not just reminding ourselves, but actually taking these specific actions like Celine just pointed out, and to continue to challenge ourselves that just because, our website says we work on these issues, to make sure we actually are creating meaningful change to live up to those words. Because there's nothing easier than to be sitting in a place like Vancouver and saying, oh yeah, we are all about racial justice. We are all about decolonization. But the proof's in the pudding. And so I think we just need to, this year we will challenge ourselves, and we will create a framework, we hope, that constantly challenges ourselves around these issues. Because I don't think we'll be happy unless it is challenging, because decolonization, as an example, is an extraordinarily hard and tough row to hoe, and it's a forever row to hoe. It never stops. And so we can expect to always be faced with this challenge, and we should always wake up every day looking forward to it. And so that's what I hope we create, those kinds of systems and frameworks that continually challenge us like that.
And, I am really excited about this coming year and the strategic planning and how we're trying to weave, our decolonization journey in that, it's like an opportunity to rethink how we work and how we act and how we dream as a team. And so much of our mission, the reason that we get out of bed in the morning to do this work, actually, sits in our understanding that the economic model that we are embedded in every day is colonial and we want to disrupt that. So it's like we're motivated by this, you know, and we just need to name it, and we need to continue to follow that. And I think, you know, that path towards, you know, decolonization is the one that will help us get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it can't just be about like an add-on. It's not an add-on. It's not about just being, you know, better people, which is really important, or a better organization about how we show up. That's also important. But it's central. It's fundamental to what we're trying to do. We are trying to, as you put it, Celine, we are trying to disrupt and change an economic system that is rooted in colonialism and is in many ways rooted directly in racism. And so when we take on the challenge of social justice, we take on the challenge of anti-racism and decolonization. Those are mission-driven opportunities and challenges for us.
Yeah, there's a quote that's something like, it's something like, if you've come here to help me, then leave. But if you've come here because you know that our liberation is tied together, then let's get to work. And I really feel that, you know, like I feel that alignment, you know, in purpose.
Yeah. There are some challenges, right? I mean, of course there's challenges, but I mean, just when I think about, you know, the three of us having this conversation right now, and I think about our governance and those sorts of things, we have some, you know, a long, tough path ahead of us to start making some decisions around this that changes how we show up right now, and that's going to be difficult for us. I mean, I look forward to it, but again, the proof will be in the changes we make.
Thank you both. And I look forward to seeing that too as we continue on this year. But reflecting on something you said last year, Chuck. So you wrote in a blog last year when the pandemic first hit that it is our deteriorating economic system that will reverberate and intensify the damage out into our future. And I'm just wondering how your perspective has changed, if it's changed since then.
Well, I'm always right, Shannon. So, so I'm more right today than ever. Sadly, I would say that in this particular case, I would most definitely stand by those words. I mean, you know, we've spent 14 months now at this point, you know, all across, well, everywhere in the world, but so many tangible examples in Canada, where people are literally talking about making choices between the economy and people's lives. Like those two things are separate things, like the economy is some separate thing that can be weighed against someone else's life. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. And so the fact that the pandemic has surfaced that strange dichotomy that people falsely create tells me everything I think I need to know about how the pandemic is affecting our perception about how we live and the role of the economy in it, and what's happening in terms of, and what might happen in terms of how we even come out of the pandemic. So if we come sort of roaring out of this pandemic, hell-bent on reinvigorating an economy that was exactly the same thing it was before we stepped into it, like we run the risk of, we will emerge from the pandemic with an even more aggressively extractive and divisive economy. And I think that's unfortunately, that's what we've seen throughout the pandemic. I probably made that comment in the context of like a collapsing stock market and those sorts of things, and a worry across the world that our modern economy was about to collapse. And yet it's bounced back, and the strength of it, the the fact that the S&P 500 climbs at the same rate as pandemic deaths climb is more indicative than the opposite, that there's a real issue that our economy is actually broken because it is so dissociated from the value of human life. And the pandemic to me has only emphasized that and exacerbated that. And I think we're at a really important pivot point where, the case in some ways is being made that you can have an economy totally disassociated from the well-being of most of the people in the world. And people are being okay with that. And so this is really a really critical time in history, I think.
So on that thread, this is to both you. What kind of economic system do you think we need as communities begin to recover and eventually emerge from the pandemic?
Celine, what do you think?
Well, I don't entirely know. I guess my hope is that we emerge from the pandemic with greater appreciation of the actual value of relationships and community. I think community is the thing that underpins all of our needs. Our ability to care for ourselves and each other is so embedded, and interwoven with community. Our mental health, like all of these things that we now are recognizing as, basic human needs. So many of them are really about community. And so, I'm interested in asking, and exploring with communities, like what that actually means in their bioregion or in their place, like these sort of like community relational place-based economies, I think are part of I don't know if they're part of the question or they're part of the answer, but they're definitely worth exploring. And I can't wait to see where it goes. I know there is so much work happening on the ground in communities across this country that is, working towards that, like sort of wholehearted, holistic, ecosystem-based, work that's happening that will inevitably transform the way we think of economics.
Yeah, I think you put it really well. An economy with community at the center, a community that emphasizes that which is local, not exclusively, but it's just more local centered. And through that, an economy that's much more ultimately resilient. It's more democratic, it's more transparent, and is basically the antithesis of what we see right now, which is this growing, faceless, monolithic kind of economy that runs right over you. And sometimes that's literal, like in the sense that it's, we're talking about an economy that's less focused on being extractive and an economy that's less focused on creating divisions between people and instead is focused on bringing people together. And I think the most, I'm at the risk of sort of going off into very sort of philosophical, difficult to grasp, even nonsensical words. And the way to bring me back is just to say just to focus on what Celine's talking about. The most practical unit to talk about an economy then that we are looking for is, well, let's look at our communities. Let's look within a community. Let's look within the people we know. And talk about what are the economic relationships that really count. Mm-hmm. What is the relationship between the people in a place and the lands and waters of that place? That's the most fundamental economic unit there is and there ought to be, and that's the one we need to work on strengthening.
Yeah, I'm putting my bet on northern communities to show us the way, for sure. There's already so much. Like such fascinating informal economic systems that are working on the ground in places that are rural and remote. And I think like part of our role in shaping the story around what economy is emerging from the pandemic is really just daylighting stuff that's already happening, that is built on reciprocity and, with others and with landscape,
Yeah, great way to put it. I think that's a solid bet.
Well, this Q&A is coming to a close. Is there anything else you want to add before we end this?
I'm just going to add that I'm so grateful that Celine, that you've come aboard, because I think it comes at a really important time for the organization. And I think with your arrival, not only do all the staff who you now are mentoring, do they get a huge step forward, a leap forward, but I think the organization as a whole is about to really grow in a healthy way and benefit from your presence. I'm really looking forward to the years ahead working with you.